Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador demands Guillermo Lazo's government to stop repression and lift the state of emergency on the 10th day of protest. On Wednesday, Bulgaria coalition government collapsed after a non-confidence vote in parliament. The Chinese government announced the renewal of weather alert for the continuous storm and floods that are hitting the country. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the TeleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. It is the 10th day of national strike in Ecuador. The Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities, CONAIE, reiterated its willingness to dialogue while the government rules out lifting the state of emergency. The organization continues to mobilize to demand space for dialogue with the government within the framework of a 10-point agenda proposed since the beginning of the conflict. They announced the refusal of the executive to satisfy their demands, as well as the militarization and repression of the popular expression of protest, which has already claimed the life of 2 people. The leaders of the Confederation, Leonidas ISSA, emphasized the movement's willingness to maintain their demands. On Tuesday night, the leader of the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador, Leonidas ISSA, once again called on all organizations to continue the national strike and to accompany the Popular and Plurinational Assembly to demand their response to the national government.
For this reason, we believe it is important, dear comrades, according to the historical line that the indigenous movement of Ecuador has had, honoring the political project that our theists and mothers entrusted us to follow, to invite all social sectors that have been part of this day of mobilization, the social organizations that in solidarity have welcomed us in their neighborhoods and have fought alongside us, the formal and informal workers and their unions, the students, teachers, neighborhood organizations, housewives, small merchants, artisans, peasants, and their organizations, Afro-descendants, people, feminist organizations, intellectuals, academics, artists, cultural managers, retirees. It is important that they join us in the Popular and Plurinational Assembly that includes all the colors of this beloved homeland, where we will analyze all the mechanisms for the fulfillment of the 10 points, and we will defend the response to the national government.
In Colombia, President-elect Gustavo Petro announced that he had a first contact with the government of Venezuela to reopen the common border. Colombia's president-elect informed this Wednesday via Twitter that he communicated with the Venezuelan government to open the border and reestablish the full exercise of human rights in the area. In recent years, the border has been partially closed and has been the focus on conflicts and escalation of tensions, which particularly affect trade between both nations. During his presidential campaign, Petro stated that it will be a priority and urged talks to achieve the reestablishment of consular relations with Venezuela for the benefit of Colombians in the neighboring country and Venezuelans in Colombia. Brazilian authorities arrested Milton Ribeiro, former education minister of President Jair Bolsonaro's government, for alleged corruption and influence trafficking. The Brazilian justice system ordered the arrest of Ribeiro on Wednesday, an allegedly favorably evangelical pastor with public resources. In a video, Ribeiro acknowledged that the funds were transferred with the knowledge of President Jair Bolsonaro to Pastor Gilmar Santos and Arilton Moura, who are also under investigation for working informally with the mayor to release funds from the Ministry of Education. A suspect drug trafficker known as Pablo Escobar of Brazil was arrested in Hungary after more than a year on the run. In a statement, Brazil's federal police said Sergio Roberto de Cavallo, known simply as Mayor Cavallo, has arrested in cooperation with Interpol and Hungarian police, describing him as one of the biggest international traffickers date. Carvalho was a former policeman who has a long life in Europe under a false identity. He was arrested in Spain, but after Putin yelled fake his death of COVID-19 in 2020 and disappeared from the radar. The police statement also said more than $100 million have been seized from the criminal organization led by Carvalho. It is accused of smuggling tons of cocaine into Europe via Brazil and laundering the profits. In Brazil, people took to streets in 20 different cities to demand an extension to a temporary law banning evictions. Our correspondent Brian Mears has the details.
On Tuesday, protests were held in 20 Brazilian cities to demand an extension to a temporary law banning all evictions that was ratified at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. As the number of Brazilians living in extreme poverty has risen from 19 million to 33 million since 2019, housing movements are worried that removing the ban will deeply exacerbate the homeless crisis.
Our anti-eviction law is under threat. If it is not renewed on the 30th, hundreds of thousands of people will be put out on the street.
Brazil already had a housing deficit of over 5 million units before President Bolsonaro took power. His government cut the social housing construction budget by 98% while rerouting federal funds to benefit middle-class real estate speculation, which has forced the poor farther and farther into high-risk areas for natural disasters like landslides and flooding.
Today, we hope to deliver this petition to the Superior Justice Court so that the zero eviction law is extended. We know it expires on the 30th, but here in Pernambuco, they already started ordering evictions today. This is absurd because the universal right to housing is guaranteed in Article 6 of the Federal Constitution.
The housing movements say they will keep the pressure up on government officials until the law is renewed. Brian Mir, TeleSUR, Recife.
The U.S. economic faces an uncertain global environmental Federal Reserve change, Jerome Powell said. In the first of two closely watched data of testimony to Congress, Powell again stressed that the Federal Reserve understands the hardship caused by rising prices and is committed to bringing down inflation, which has reached a 4-year high. The U.S. Central Bank last week announced the most aggressive interest rate increase in nearly 30 years and promised more actions to come to combat the price surges, with gas and food costs turning and millions of Americans struggling to make ends meet. But as fears among the rapid tightening of financial conditions could go too far and tip the world's largest economy into recession. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Bulgarian coalition government collapsed after non-confidence votes in parliament. The motion had been filed by the Conservation and Green Party after blaming the government for what it considered a failure of its economic and financial policies as customers' inflation surged. 123 lawmakers in the 246 chambers voted in favor of the motion, 2 more than needed to succeed, while 116 voted against. One member of parliament missed the vote through illness. President Roman Radev will now have 3 attempts to see if any party can form a governing majority among lawmakers. Prime Minister Kirill Peskov's party is expected to receive the first mandate from Radev to try to gather a majority, followed by Government and then other parties of Radev's choice. Analysts say there is no guarantees that another national vote in this country of 6.5 million people, which last year went through 3 such polls, will end its political instability. Russian President Vladimir Putin left flowers at the tomb of a known soldier outside the Kremlin wall in Moscow to mark the anniversary of the day that Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941. In the same context, Russia accused Germany of anti-Russian sentiment in a statement on the anniversary of the invasion of the Soviet Union by Nazi troops in 1941, as tensions raged over Ukraine. The Russian foreign minister also accused NATO member Germany of building up its military presence near Russia's western borders. Tensions between Moscow and Berlin have soared after Germany condemned Russia's special military operation in Ukraine, joining Western sanctions on the Kremlin and supplying weapons to Kiev. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said his government will cut the value-added tax on electricity but have to shield the consumer from soaring inflation fueled by the conflict in Ukraine. The announcement comes after Sánchez socialists were trashed Sunday in a real election in Andalusia, a long-time party stronghold. Sánchez told Parliament that VAT reduction from 10 to 5% will be approved at an extraordinary cabinet meeting on Saturday. His government last year slashed the VAT rate on electricity from 21 to 10% to ease the impact of electricity prices hitting on customers. The last tax cut will be part of a package which will be adopted on Saturday to help customers deal with rising inflation, which hit 8.7% in May, its highest level in decades. The Prime Minister did not provide further details about the measures to be adopted. Thousands of farmers gathered with their tractors in central Netherlands to protest the government's far-reaching plans to cut nitrogen emissions. In one of their longest even demonstrations, the farmers demand the scrapping of recently announced plan by the House-based government, which could see a 30% reduction in livestock. The Netherlands, the world's second-largest agricultural exporter, is one of the top greenhouse gas emitters in Europe, especially of nitrogen, with much of this blamed on cattle producers, manure, and fertilizers. But farmers said they are being unfairly targeted as opposed to the big businesses and industry, with many vowing to resist any plans to escalate down or close a farm. United Kingdom inflation rate hit for a year the height of 9.1% in May, according to a data released by its Office for National Statistics on Wednesday. The number was up slightly compared with 9% registered in the previous month. The government department stated one of the major contributions to the record high inflation is the result of the soaring energy costs in April. The country's finance minister, Chancellor of the Executive Rishi Sunak, my parents said the government is using all the tools at its disposal to bring inflation down and combat rising prices. Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday called for strengthening global development into a new era when delivering a keynote speech via video link at the opening ceremony of the BRICS Business Forum, noting that development holds the key to tackle challenges and promote people's well-being. President Xi said that the aspiration of the people and the interests of the international community should be the focus in turning global development into a new era to bring benefits to people of all countries. The forum, taking place in Beijing, both online and offline, off the sideline of the 1/4 BRICS Summit, will fully demonstrate the virtuality and attractiveness of BRICS economic and trade cooperation. BRICS, an emerging market group that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, represents approximately 4% of the global population, accounts for about 25% of the global economy. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered a recovery keynote speech prior to the virtual BRICS summit hosted by Beijing. BRICS members are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as we said, a group of emerging economies that Modi said can evolve as an engine of global growth.
Today, when the whole world is focusing on post-COVID recovery, the role of BRICS countries will continue to remain very important. This year, we are expecting 7.5% growth, which makes us the fastest growing major economy.
Russian President Vladimir Putin called for strengthening ties with BRICS countries and unprecedented Western sanctions ahead of the summit of leaders from Brazil, India, China, and South Africa.
Businessmen of our countries are forced to develop their business under difficult conditions where Western partners neglect the basic principles of market economy, free trade, as well as the inviolability of private property. Russian businessmen are actively developing ties with BRICS countries' business community. For example, there are talks on opening of Indian chain stores in Russia, increasing the share of Chinese automobiles, equipment, and machinery on the Russian market. Russian oil deliveries to China and India are increasing. Agricultural cooperation is developing dynamically.
And we have more news coming up after this financial break, so don't go away. Welcome back. The Chinese government announced on Wednesday that it has renewed the weather alert of the continuous storm and floods that are hitting the country. The Meteorological Center of the Asian area reported that rainfall record is expected for the eastern, southern, and central regions, for which the authorities call on people to remain alert and take precautions. In this sense, the government activated the maximum alert for the southern territories after identifying the risk of flooding in the basin of this torrent. In this context, the central government allocated some $30 million for search and rescue operations and flood control. Scientists reaffirm climate change is a factor behind the unprecedented floods in Bangladesh and northeastern India that have killed many people and made lives miserable for millions of others. According to Anjal Prakash, research director at India's Bharati Institute of Public Policy, the sheer volume of early rain this year that lashes the region is just a few weeks and makes the current floods an unprecedented situation. Although the region is not strange to flooding, it typically takes place later in the year when monsoon rains are well underway. This year's torrential rainfall lashes the area as early as March, but scientists said that it has made the monsoon more variable over the past decades. This means that much of the rain expects to fall in a year that is arriving in a span of weeks.
Bangladesh has been known for fighting cyclones every year, and the number and the frequency of cyclones has been increasing. But this flood in Bangladesh, especially in the northwest region, the Sylhet area that presently it is reeling under, has been unprecedented. It has not happened in the recent years.
In Afghanistan, the State Ministry of Disaster Management reported that more than 1,000 people lost their lives after the earthquake that struck early on Wednesday. The epicenter of the earthquake was located 44 kilometers from the city of Kosh in the southeast of the Asian country and had an intensity of 5.9 on the Richter scale. The most affected provinces in Afghanistan were Paktika, Host, and Nangarhar. According to local media, the number of wounded rose to 1,500. Authorities expect the toll to increase throughout the day. Afghanistan national government approved nearly $11 million in financial assistance for earthquake-affected families. The country's Prime Minister Mullah Mohammad Hassan Akhund expressed his condolences to the victims. He also presided over the emergency cabinet meeting in which he approved the amount of monetary aid to those affected by the earthquake. In this end, it was informed that relief items were sent, including tens of blankets to attend to the people residing in the affected areas. Furthermore, the government of Iran sent medical supplies to help Afghanistan to face the aftermath of the natural disaster. At least 5 people, including 4 children, died after strong rains led to flooding in Ivory Coast economic capital, Abidjan. Heavy rains fell through Tuesday night, flooding many neighborhoods of Abidjan and leaving several key words unusable. Emergency services confirmed the children died in landslip and the adults was swept away by the water in the city's Bingerville neighborhood. They added that 85 people were rescued while a building threatened to collapse was evacuated. According to data from the Meteorological Agency, between Monday and midday Tuesday, some neighborhoods in Abidjan received around 200 millimeters of rainfall, the equivalent of several weeks of rains.
Everything I have is on me. I have nothing left. Everything in the house is gone with the water. The water has taken everything away. This morning we had nothing. Nothing to eat, nothing to wear. Everything is gone.
We have floods almost every year, but this was the biggest one so far. We had lots and lots of damage. The fangs and then all the kitchen utensils. The living room was emptied. And there was a death here. There were vehicles that were completely damaged.
61 years after the assassination of Congolese independence hero Patrice Lumumbas, his last remains returned to his homeland on Wednesday for an emotionally charged 9-day tour around the country and a burial ceremony. Although only a 2 remains for his body was dissolved in acid, the tooth has been placed in a coffin. The tooth has been handed over to his relative on Monday in Brussels. As per a court ruling of 2020, but the handover ceremony had been postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The coffin and the accompanying delegation arrived in Kinshasa, and from there they fled to the central province of Sankuru, where Lumumbas, the country's first post-independence leader, was born in a village of Anola in 1925. Lumumbas' last remains will be taken to site relevant to Lumumbas' lives and be laid to rest in a mausoleum in the capital Kinshasa on June 30th, following 3 days of national mourning. TeleSUR expanding signal with new satellites, parameters, and see more than ever. The world connects to us, and our stories are being heard all around the globe. These parameters are in place since June 1st in Latin America and the Caribbean, both in English and Spanish, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signal in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. This new multi-platform will continue providing trustful content to oppose the hegemonic media narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. With that story, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well. TeleSUR English, I'm from the South. I'm Ana Marrero, and thank you for watching.